With isolationism, we know this is the American government trying to reduce our, not just influence, but our sort of relative existence in terms of other countries' affairs. So this is going to be a reaction to World War I. It starts with the irreconcilable senators like Henry Cabot Lodge after World War I. They refused to sign the Treaty of Versailles because it has the League of Nations in it. We don't become part of the League of Nations, which is going to be a reason for the failure of peace. We're going to actually try to, one of the problems we saw leading up to World War I was an arms race. So one of the first things that as a government, they tried to get countries to have similar sized navies. We talked about Captain Alfred Mahan and the importance of a navy. Britain's navy being huge. America became a very huge navy. Japan had a huge navy. And so we saw when we looked at the Treaty of Versailles what happened to the size of the German navy. It was reduced substantially. But in 1921-22 there was a conference called the Washington Disarmament Conference. And at the Washington Disarmament Conference, it was agreed upon that it was a bad idea to have a naval arms race. And Charles Evans Hughes, the Secretary of State, organized the conference, and they came up with several treaties, a 5-power treaty, a 9-power treaty. And what this essentially did was try to peg the sizes of the country's navies as a way to reduce naval armaments. So in America, so you have the U.S., you have Britain, you have Japan, you have France, you have Italy, for example. So in terms of battleships, sort of like the litmus test for how big a navy you had, we could have 5 battleships to their 5 battleships to their 3 to their 1.75 to their 1.75. Obviously you can't have 0.75 of a ship, but the ratio has to be similar. And the whole point of this is when they sign this treaty, no one can get bigger than it is already. Now if you look up here, France and Italy had lost prestige in terms of their military, but Japan had not. And Japan wasn't happy about this. And so one thing America did to sort of offset the Japanese feelings about this was to say, okay, well, we need you to have 3 battleships to our 5, but we will promise unofficially to give the Pacific a lot less American attention. That is to say, Japan was going to have more run in the Pacific, which is going to be a precursor to their dominance in the 1930s, because while World War II started in the early 1940s for us, Japan invaded Manchuria in 1931, so this is less than 10 years away from Japan starting the Pacific version of World War II. So, but in terms of isolationism, this is reducing naval armaments. It's reducing the possibility of an arms race. Also, we looked at the Clark Memorandum. This is the Clark Memorandum. Reuben Clark wrote this in 1928. He was the Secretary of State after Hughes, and what he promotes is America not getting involved in Latin American affairs. We wouldn't intervene just to protect our own property rights. And this is a reversal from the bad neighbor policy, what we call the big stick diplomacy. And while some might say this seems almost altruistic, it's also strategic in nature because the whole point is let's not worry about what's going on in the rest of the world, let's focus on what's going on inside of America. And while for Latin Americans this was good and probably even at some level, and actually not some level, what was deserved, what it does when America decides not to involve itself around the world, especially as an economic and political giant, is it allows other countries to step forward. There becomes a power vacuum as America steps away. And we're going to see Japan and Germany specifically become more aggressive in the 1930s, and America is there to do nothing, or not there to do anything, I guess is more accurate. So the Clark Memorandum is a reversal of the bad neighbor policy. In fact, in the 1930s, Roosevelt will write a policy that we know as the good neighbor policy that sort of extends this more fully and more officially. But Washington Disarmament Conference, the Clark Memorandum, and 1928, my all-time favorite is the Kellogg-Briand Pact. The Kellogg-Briand Pact was a pact that was signed by, how many was it signed by? 60-something people? 60-something countries? 62 nations signed it. And it makes war illegal. War is illegal. And luckily, since it's been signed, we've had no other wars except a whole bunch of them. And it said the only purpose that you can have, only reason you go to war is for defensive purposes. Well, if it's for defensive purposes, you had to look at it one of two ways. Either that's impossible because if no one is attacking, then no one needs to defend themselves, so war can't happen. That was their theory. Or you can say, well, we had to attack because we felt like we were in jeopardy, right? That's the defensive purpose. America claimed that our invasion of Iraq was for defensive purposes. But the Calabria Pact was the first of its kind to push for peace, and it had two lasting effects. Number one, there was no enforcement mechanism, so these countries are getting used to debating a lot. They're getting used to signing these pacts that have no enforcement mechanism. So what happens when it's broken? Well, somebody has to go to war. Well, then you freaking broke it again. So that's a problem. And number two, with the Calabria Pact, now America says, and a lot of other countries say, well, we signed this pact, war can't be legal, war isn't illegal, war is illegal, so what's the point of having a big army and navy to protect ourselves when we're not going to need it anyway? So America and the other countries put their guards down. But not everyone did, specifically Germany. And they're going to ramp up in the 1930s, the late 1930s specifically, as the Americans, the British, the French are not. It's almost like a bunch of boxers agreeing to never work out because they're not going to fight, except one guy does work out and train, and then all of a sudden they're going to fight, and you've got one boxer who's ready to fight, and the rest of them are flabby and, and hate fighting. So the Calabria Pact is another example of isolationism. And while this piece of isolationism and the Five-Power Treaty specifically targets real foreign policy issues, this is more pie in the sky, but will have lasting sort of realpolitik effects. The Dawes Plan is my favorite thing in the world. Germany was having a horrendous time economically. In 1923 alone, they had 23,000% inflation. As you'll recall, when we read the Treaty of Versailles, with the reparations clause, they had to pay back every single dollar that all the other countries had to spend. That's $32 billion approximately in 1919 money. So you can imagine what that is today. So one thing Germany started doing was printing money. When they started printing money, the value of the mark, which is what their currency was called, goes down. And as it went down, they printed off more money. So literally people were getting paid at lunchtime and then at nighttime because the prices kept going up. Imagine a loaf of bread in today's terms being $1 at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then $2 at noon, and then $4 at evening, and then $8 the next morning, and $16 at lunch, and $32 at night, and $64 the next morning, and $128 at lunch, and $256 at dinner time. And the next morning, it's 512, and then at lunch it's 1,024. And you can sort of see where I'm going with this. And this is their reality through a lot of 1923. And people in the middle class lost their savings in weeks. People who had saved their whole lives lost everything, and there is a real hatred toward the Treaty of Versailles, and they're looking for someone to blame. In fact, Hitler's first push at power was in 1923 in the beer hall push, and he's arrested, he goes to jail. That's where he writes Mein Kampf. It's in reaction to this. So what's America do about it? Well, we decide to get involved so we didn't have to get involved, right? Let's try to cure their economy because they're consumers, but if they are going to be unstable, that could cause a problem. We would have to intervene. So here is Britain and France, who owe us money, as you'll remember, because we became a creditor nation after World War I. You have Germany, who owes us money, and you have America. So what happens is, America gives Germany money, who pays off Britain and France, who pays us. And that's the Dawes Plan. And the whole point is to stabilize Germany, so they can pay Britain and France, and so they can stabilize, so they can pay us, and so their economies don't fall in the crapper like Germany's. And at some level it worked, but not well enough. And there's so much animosity towards the Treaty of Versailles in Germany that they were stepped on, they were used, it was a trading, it was awful. And we're going to see, because of their economics, that it's going to lead to radical solutions. Remember, horrible economic times tend to lead to radical solutions. It happened in Germany. It happened in China. It happened in what we know as the Soviet Union. And during the Great Depression, people say that it could have been radical. Some argue that FDR was radical. Others would say that he saved capitalism from itself and made America stronger, right, as we became embroiled in a depression. So that is our sort of look at real quick isolationism as a way to back up from the world, right? We're backing up from our responsibilities around the world. Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? That's for you to determine. I can say that it did lead to some problems, right? The failure of peace. Why did peace fail? Well, for number one, the Great Depression, right? People stop worrying about the rest of the world when there's a depression. If you have nothing, worrying about people around the world who have nothing becomes a lot less important. Our government has less prestige. People don't have as much money, and the depression itself is going to be a mitigating factor for a long-term cause of World War II. Another one is this war psychosis, that everyone was so scared of war because they saw what happened in World War I. So those people who were not scared, specifically the Germans, and wanted revenge, they could play and take advantage of that war psychosis, of that fear of war, by pushing people back further and further, right? There was a line in the sand Germany wasn't allowed to cross. But when they did cross it, what was Britain and France going to do about it? And as they did less and less, when Germany would cross that line, that gave Germany, specifically Hitler in the 1930s when he comes to power, more and more confidence to keep crossing that line. And the Great Depression, the war psychosis, and then some of these, specifically the Calais-Briand Pact, are mitigating and contributing factors to World War II. Alright, so you should have all the first page done. Flip the paper over to your packet. Let's talk about Hoover's presidency real fast. Let me see how much time we've got. Holy crap. Alright, let's talk about Hoover. Hoover, interestingly, was probably the best, in fact not probably, was the most capable of the three presidents. History has not been kind to Hoover, but probably there is some unfair criticism